Hey, welcome to a special edition of Inside the Birds. It's Geoff, Mosher, and Adam Caplan, and we're going to go inside the situation with Dallas Goedert, which really took a turn, of course, after, Adam, we release our 53-man roster projection pod, which came out in the morning, and you and I in it had a debate, does Goedert on the 53? Is he not? You had some really good rationale, which proved to be correct. As the Eagles and Dallas Goedert work it out, he'll be on the team in 2025. And this is when I look at it, and I'll have you go into the details in a second, but just from a big picture, I think you got to applaud, if you're like the Eagle fan, like the way HowieRoseman handled it both publicly and behind the scenes, and the way Dallas Goedert, who you never heard anything from him or his camp while things were going on, probably making the best decision, weighing all the factors that we had talked about in the pod. Do you have some leverage? Yeah, not a lot. I mean, do you dare the Eagles to release you if you don't take the bet? He decided to do what he felt was best, and that's the situation. He's going to be back with the team, which the Eagles really needed him back.
Oh, badly. Remember when I asked you if something happened, which I was not expecting, like he was going to be traded after the draft?
Mm-hmm.
Think about, they had 6 other tight ends, and you go be ugly, and that's what it would be. You don't have a starting quality tight end. You could get away with 12 personnel, working all your tight ends in. Well, the top 3 guys would have been Calcaterra, Granson, and Harrison Bryant. Bryant probably would have been the starter under that scenario. It's not a bad backup, but that's not what you want when you're an elite team. You don't settle. And as I told our Patreon members weeks ago, I said I think what's going to happen is Goddard's going to be back on a pay reduction. I don't know. I didn't know then that where I know what we were hearing from other teams is that, we would take him, but we're not going to pay him 13, 14, 15 million a year. That's not going to happen at 30 years old with his injury history. I just felt like everything I'd heard was that, we put this out, I guess in early, whenever, I don't know, first week of March, that they gave him permission to seek a trade. He didn't ask to be traded. They were trying to move him. And, they were going to be fair to God to try to put him with a team where he'd feel comfortable and get the kind of contract he wanted or something close to it. But it just didn't work out, and he's back, and the Eagles are better off for it. Again, I'll say it. It's nice that they're 8-1, but that's not a full season. And when he didn't play last season, they're better with him. He's a top 5 tight end, top 7 tight end, depending on who's ranking them. We could all have our rankings, but he does everything well. He's had a lot of freak injuries. I can't really explain why he's been hurt a lot, but the dude's a stud tight end. He really is. And he hasn't slowed down. That's not the problem. He hadn't slowed down at all. You kind of have to bake in, like if you have him for fantasy, he's probably going to miss 3 to 4 games. That's just the way it is.
Of course. Let's talk about our understanding of the contract. So like you said, he was on the books originally for 14 million, right?
15.25. Yeah. The cash was just around 14 million on his non-guaranteed option bonus, which is due closer to the season. And then the non-guaranteed base salaries have had a minimum, so it's 15.25. But this is what I try to explain to people. If you didn't settle his contract, which was going to be a pay reduction, he was never going to get close to 15 million if he was coming back. You got to reach it before he starts working out your facility, because since there was no guaranteed money, you couldn't have him come there. And if he got hurt lifting weights and dropped a weight on his chest and towards pectoral, you can't trade him. And if he can't play, you can't cut him if he's hurt. There is injury protection that way. If a guy cannot play, you can't cut him due to injury, even if he doesn't have any guaranteed money. So you couldn't have him not. You had to settle the situation, right? You had to figure this out. I haven't gotten the breakdown yet of how much is guaranteed. I know the Inquirer reported 10 million, but I need to know what's guaranteed.
Right.
I'm very curious. But bottom line is they found a way to make it work. And it's kind of like Josh Sweat, right? Josh Sweat took a major pay cut, significant. It was around 50%. But he balled out. He understood. And by the way, it's different. Dallas Goedert played well when he played last season. With Josh Sweat, 23, he did not play well. That was not a good season. And the Eagles had tremendous leverage. Like they he was making so much money, and none of it was guaranteed, Geoff, that they could have just cut him.
Right.
But they didn't. And I give Howie credit. He didn't have to bring him back. He just said, you know what? They didn't know they were going to draft Jalen Hunt at that point, but they could have signed a bunch of veteran guys, to replace him.
Mm-hmm.
But it worked out. That's a situation where a guy took it the right way. He balled out, and he got a great season. And they got paid. Rosenhaus got him a great deal.
Right. It will be tougher. I like this comparison. It'll be a little tougher for Dallas, even if he comes and balls out and has a great year, to get the kind of contract Josh Sweat.
He's much older. Yeah, he's also turned 31 in January.
He's right end. Yeah, but to your point, if Dallas Goedert, and this is why I say you got to give Dallas Goedert some credit for having the ability to see the forest through the trees. If Dallas Goedert tried to play tough with this and said, no, I'm not going to negotiate and I'm going to show up and you're going to pay me that money or I dare you to cut, Howie could have traded him. There were reports of teams called, but what if Howie said, fine, I'll trade you to the Jaguars or some team that's just not very good, where you're going to be in a bad scenario on a 1-year deal, hoping to play well, right, and go out and make money. The best situation for not only the Eagles, but for Dallas Goedert is to be on the Eagles, because this is such a good offense and it's a good atmosphere and the same basic concepts of the offense. And for him to thrive, his best chance is to play with the Eagles, and he knows that. And even though he knows he's also north of 30 and he may not get the greatest payday after this year, he still has a good chance to get a decent one if he goes and has a really nice year. Look what George Kittle just made at his age. So I'm not saying he's going to reset the market, but my point is, for his future, knowing this is his last year for the Eagles, this was the best spot for him. So it did make sense for him to play some ball.
You ever hear the saying, the best deals you make are the ones you don't make?
All the time.
This is the one, because they didn't draft his backup. It's one thing. If they would have taken a tight end within the first 2 rounds, that changes everything. In terms of, okay, then they would have been probably more motivated to trade him. They just knew if he was coming back, he wouldn't come back at 15.25. That wasn't happening. He knew that. The agent knew that. He knew that. It wasn't. They weren't at 30 years old. It's the catch justification. How are you paying him over $15 million? When he's 30 and he has trouble staying healthy, like if you own a business, right, and your best worker or you're in that part of your business, he's your best worker, and he's being paid $100,000 a year, and then you go, you know what, you're really good when you're there. Like, let's say the guy gets sick a lot, he's just unavailable, he's got stuff going on in his life. Well, we love you, want to keep you, but we can't justify paying $100,000 a year. You're not available all the time. We'll pay we'll pay $65,000, and we'll give you a chance to make up a little bit, but if you hit your sales goals. But we're not paying you $100,000 anymore. We can't do it. It's not that we don't have the cash; it's that we just can't justify it. But as we told people, I want to add this. We did tell people when we did our free agency preview the morning of the legal tampering period, as fans love to call it in some of the media, on that Monday, that they're going to be shedding cash. It's not going to be what people want, and they're going to be shedding cash. They're not. Howie's not gone through anything like this before.
Right.
Their football department, their personal department, and it's just what's happening. And it started with Goedert, Gardner-Johnson, Slay. They could have kept Slay.
Absolutely.
Slay closed the season well. He's better.
If this were 5 years ago, they would have just restructured everybody's deal, added dummy years, spread it out, kicked the can down the road. Yeah.
But the cash was the cap had nothing to do with it. It's the cash. They were shedding cash, and everything they've done this year, that would say it. But let's move this along. There's honestly. Now, there's no way Barkley's getting 2,000 yards again, but he's still going to be really good if he's healthy. And now Van Sumeren, is now a fullback. We know how they liked using it last year. They saw something with Ben. We'll have to look into exactly what the injury was. We know it was a bad knee injury and it's surgery. But who's saying that this offense can't be unbelievably dynamic and great?
I mean, everybody but one starter returns, and obviously guard's a big spot. But that's there's literally zero reason, other than maybe some regression or league catching up to a few things, that there's no reason that this team should not be a top 3 offense.
The only issue is what our friends brought up in Patreon. I think Frank might have brought it up, or Chris, one of the Chris's that goes to the chats. And we don't really talk about this enough. And I don't, Kevin Patullo is your first time play caller. You don't know till you start calling. You don't know it's going to work.
That's true. But at least Kevin could say, if things aren't working, then I'm just going to do, because this is what you remember last year. The first 8 games weren't pretty offensively either. They just started running the ball. I said, Kevin,
we have that. Yeah, you could always lean on the run.
Hand the ball off to Saquon Barkley, and we'll be all right. Yeah.
But well, they're going to do that anyway because it's going to start with a run. They're not. Yep. It is hard to say that because we have to get used to saying that they're a running team.
Yeah, it works.
It is what it is. They're the best. The Ravens were 1. I think they were 2, and Saquon had the best season in NFL history in terms of through the playoffs. So they have a chance to really be dynamic on offense, but we just don't know about Patullo. We just don't know yet. I have to keep thinking about that because I've talked to guys who've coached with him before. Everybody likes Kevin. I think he's really smart, very detailed and organized. He was Nick's guy. He organized stuff for Nick, and him and don't forget one more thing. Him and Hurts have worked together now 5 years. That matters.
I agree.
He knows Jalen really well, so that's good. But you don't know till you get there. You have no idea how this guy could call plays because he hadn't done it.
Yeah, that's true. The last thing I'll say on this is that I think Howie is doing a good job because he's now had to do this a couple of years in a row. You mentioned Josh Sweat. It's also similar in fashion. They were ready to say goodbye to Darius Slay a couple of years ago. In fact, the Ravens, we all know
they did.
The Ravens were speed dialing him. They did, and then,
they told him we're cutting you, and then 4 hours later they're not.
Yeah. So and listen, that turned out. You just said some of the best moves are the ones you don't make.
Right.
Howie didn't let his ego there get in the way. He said, no, we need the guy. Have Big Dom made the call, and which is the ultimate recruiting tool. And it worked out. And it did even going back to James Bradbury, who they let hit the free agent market first. It's not like they immediately re-signed him. Now that one turned out to not be great because then they gave him too much money and he had to be on the roster. My point is he's getting used to this. Like, this is not an easy thing to play this game of chicken or to take this kind of risk. He has to do it, but I thought he handled it publicly really well in the past. In the past, if you asked Howie about this situation, right, he would have said, "What do you ask me for? Dallas got under contract."
Oh, yeah.
And he would have been like, he would have sort of been snippy about it, but behind the scenes, he would have been doing what he was doing. Now, he never lied to the media. He without saying everything, he basically said it was a situation they're working through. He's smart enough to know that the media knows and understands the situation, so he didn't undermine them. And then he also spoke highly of Dallas Goedert and never acted like Dallas was out the door. Sorry, we're moving on. So he did a nice
Jeffrey
job.
Did though at the owners' meetings though. I mean, basically,
Jeffrey did.
Remember that? He was starting to talk about the players that they traded, and like he was he was like, hey, he kind of put Goddard in that same boat. I'm like, geez, you really going to say this?
I know. Howie was like, Jeffrey, let me handle this.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I would have done. But look, it's
good on both of them.
Yeah, it all worked out well. We talked about this the last show. That I said what you said. Basically, that thing has been handled with class, and I just felt like everything I'd heard in the offseason sounded like he was going to be back unless there was some team that's going to give Goddard what he really wanted. I just didn't see it at 30 with his injury history. I've learned a lot about contracts, and the term is cash justification. Someone gave me that, so I like that line. And I love your line, cash casualty, right? Because they're really
not a
really
cash casualty.
Right. Cap casualties don't happen. Teams don't cut players for cap issues anymore, folks. Get with it. It's all about cash spending. And I was like, look, okay, Eagles got to be careful. You're playing with fire. If you trade Goddard, who are you going to replace him with? Well, nobody. They didn't have anyone, and it all worked out. It really all worked out.
And that's about it. So that is the situation with Dallas Goedert. We wanted to give everybody an update, and we will continue, obviously, Inside the Birds pretty soon with our second part of our 53-man roster projection. It'll be on the defense. We've already done the offense, and now we will head on to the defense in the next episode. That's going to do it for this special edition of Inside the Birds. For Adam Caplan, I'm Geoff Mosher. As always, we thank you for flying with us inside the bird.